Welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast, episode 13 this week. I'm Jeremy and I'm here with Jeff. Jeff, how's it going this week?
It's moving along. Thank you very much.
Good. Jeff holds down our Rocky Mountain base and he does a great job. We both got snow last night. So here it is, almost the end of February, and we're finally starting to get snow where I live. We've had kind of a bummer year in terms of snow, but we're getting it now.
It happens a lot the last 10 or 20 years, I feel like.
Yeah.
There'll be a really kind of just a crapshoot December, January, February, and then boom, spring skiing comes.
And then next year, by Thanksgiving, we could have 2 feet of snow. So we'll see how it goes. So I'm really looking forward to today's album. This is an album that neither Jeff or I were super familiar with. And I'll be interested to hear what you thought about it, Jeff. And I learned a lot this week as I kind of delved into this album. Our album today, by the way, is Smokin by Humble Pie from 1972, and we'll get to that in here in just a sec. I did want to share one thing with you, Jeff, and with everyone else. I subscribed to this YouTube channel, probably a year ago. It's a young lady in the UK named Ches Kane, and I saw her singing, I think it was a Pat Benatar song. And I remember just seeing this, and it was just, it's just her. I think it was even black and white. She's just in a little recording booth with the mic, and she was singing a Pat Benatar song, and she was really good. And so I just subscribed. And so every few weeks when a new video came up, I'd watch her, and she's singing like Pat Benatar and Vixen and all this 80s hair metal stuff and
Lita Ford.
Yeah, that's totally what she does. But it's really good and I like it. And it's not just her vocals are great, but the whole point I'm getting to is she has a new album out. It's coming out in March, and it's on Frontier Records. We've talked about Frontier in the past. Frontier is kind of promoting this whole melodic rock, 80s style rock. And I've heard a couple songs from her album and they're good. I mean, they sound like 1986, right? They sound like her, but her vocals are really good. And the guitar is that really, if you're into that 80s guitar sound, I mean, they nail it. It sounds really good. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. We'll have more news on that. I actually reached out to see if we could interview her sometime. I'm still here. Looks like I disappeared. It's just my camera's freaking out. I actually kind of reached out and sent an IM to see if we could interview her at some point. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure lots of people are reaching out wanting to interview her, but it's kind of cool. I like that 80s stuff, and it's kind of almost a nostalgia thing for me, but I like I like those old 80s tunes. So we'll see how that plays out.
Let me ask you, did in the mix, was the snare drum just massive reverb on the snares?
I didn't notice. You notice those things better than I do.
I love it. It's like you could, if you would like to isolate it, it'd probably like fill the room with one
exactly.
hit.
Just this. Yeah. But the guitars were legit. I mean, they were the legit 80s sound. And the vocals it sounded like a Vixen album from 1985 or 86 or something. But it was kind of fun. I'm kind of looking forward to see what the album sounds like. So when we come back, Jeff, let's jump in to this album from Humble Pie from 1972, Smokin.
Okay. Yes, indeed.
All right. So, and I don't know if do you want to kind of jump in and do the whole history, or do you want me to, or what are you? I feel like I just talk all over you all the time.
No, you're good at you're good at it. You're good at it.
Okay,
you're more polished. I'll get there.
I'll kind of talk about.
I'm a good side man.
History. You do great. I just need to talk less so you can talk more. So, all right. So we'll go back, hop back in. Welcome back to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast, episode 13. And today we are unpacking the classic Humble Pie album from 1972. It's called Smokin'. And, anyone that listens to classic rock radio is familiar with 30 Days in the Hole, I think. If you were to ask typically anyone, hey, have you ever heard this song? And they might not be able to tell you who did it, but I think probably anyone that listens to your local classic rock radio station would at least be familiar with that song. And to be honest, that's about all I knew about Humble Pie. I knew that Peter Frampton had been a member of Humble Pie.
Yeah.
That's about all I knew.
Did you know the Black Coffee, that song?
That's a song that I see brought up all the time, but I can't tell you I'm familiar with the song. I'll have to go listen to it. It's not on this album. Was that on their very first album?
I don't think so. I will check. Yeah.
And then I'll edit it. So when I say when it was on their first album, you can say, yes, it's on their second album, blah, blah, blah. Then it makes us sound smarter.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think, where the heck did it go? There it is. Black Coffee. (1973). Eat It.
The Eat It album. Okay. Well,
Eat It.
I'm going to have to.
He way ahead of Weird Al, right?
Yeah, it was a precursor to Weird Al. I knew they were influential. I didn't think of them as Weird Al. But, we can't really talk about Humble Pie. Oh, I got to turn off my thing here. Hang on here. Let me turn this off. All right. We can't really talk about Humble Pie without really talking about Steve Marriott. And Steve Marriott's one of these names when you were a kid reading the classic rock magazines or the guitar magazines, they'd talk about singers and all of this. And Steve Marriott's a name that I've always heard of and never really dug into. And this is kind of funny when I say this, but I'll admit it. When I was listening to this album, the first time I popped it in here a couple of weeks ago, and this was Jeff's idea. He said, let's do this album, which is great. I'm glad you recommended this. One of the first thoughts I had was, I'm like, wow, he sings a lot like Robert Plant. And I didn't mean the voice sounded like Robert Plant, but the way he phrased, the way he did everything. And I thought, yeah, he kind of sounds like Robert Plant. And then as I've done my homework, I realize that's not the case. Robert Plant sounds like Steve Marriott. Steve Marriott he was really influential to Robert Plant. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page were big fans of a band called The Small Faces, right? Mm-hmm. That's probably a band that some of us are familiar with. Steve Marriott was in Small Faces. And I didn't realize this until doing my homework here. I always thought that was a weird name, The Small Faces. Well, in the mod culture of the 60s, the mods, when I say mod, I think of Austin Powers, right? but that was the culture, right? In the 60s.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, exactly. In the mod culture of the day, a face was someone that was cool, that was someone that was a mod, that was an Austin Powers, right? Yeah, baby. Yeah, same, and so it was a girlfriend of Steve Marriott's who came up with the idea of calling them the Small Faces, because at the time, everyone in the band was like 5'5". Okay. So here's all these, what's the word I'm looking for?
Vertically challenged.
Yeah. Vertically challenged. Yeah. Diminutive. Yes. All these diminutive band members were all short. And so she came up with the idea of the small faces, meaning these are all hipsters, but they're all short. They're the small faces.
I love that.
And the small faces were pretty influential. And I was reading one article where at one point Robert Plant was a big fan, and he'd come and see them play all the time, and he'd even like run errands for them to pick up, lunch or whatever they needed. So he was almost like this little fanboy of the small faces. And you hear the similarities between Steve Marriott and Robert Plant in this album in a few places. Just the phrasing, their voices are different, but the way that Marriott sings, you go, okay, so that's where Robert Plant got that from.
I gotta say, the whole thing threw me for a loop, listening to the vocals, because at some point I read that Steve Marriott wanted to have more of an R&B kind of bluesy gospel thing, and he hired the trio called the Blackberries, right? Mm-hmm. These three women that we'll probably get into a little bit,
right?
And so when I was listening to Smokin', and I heard the vocals, even some of the giggles and the laughs,
right?
I'm like, oh, that's one of the three. That sounds like a woman. Mm-hmm. And then I saw this live video of Steve Marriott singing, and the voice was what I thought was a woman's voice. Yeah. So now I'm all confused. Yeah. I don't know if they're not credited with singing lead, any of these ladies on this album. So I mean, to think he can sing that high, I was like, what is going on?
and high with dynamics. It's one thing to just hit a single high note. Lots of guys can do that, but he's way up there and doing crazy inflections and things. No, he's really good. I mean, even 30 Days in the Hole, it's way up there. And you're like, wow. And Frampton, this is after Frampton's gone, by the way. By the time this album came out, Frampton was already gone. But one of the things that I was reading about was Frampton and Steve Marriott had become pretty good friends and were working on things together. Marriott was trying to get the Small Faces to bring Frampton in, and they just weren't that keen on it. And at some point, Steve left the band, was frustrated, and apparently like in the middle or right after a show said, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving. And then that's when he and Frampton hooked up and started Humble Pie. The Small Faces became the Faces, and Marriott was replaced by a guy we've all heard of named Rod Stewart. And it's funny. I listened to the album before I started doing my research, and it was one of these songs on this album. I think it was Come On Everybody was the one I heard that. And I said, man, that sounds like a Faces song. And then I go back and do all my homework and realize, well, kind of makes sense. He was in the Small Faces, and then they just kind of replaced him with Rod Stewart when he left. But much of that musical core is still there. But yeah, when we did our Rock and Roll Family Tree episode, Steve Marriott and the Small Faces play heavily into this whole, family tree, because there are so many tendrils that come out of the Small Faces. One of the interesting ones is Greg Ridley, who was the bass player. He came out of a group called Spooky Tooth. And Spooky Tooth, if you look at Spooky Tooth's personnel, there's like 50 guys have been in that group. You got Mick Jones, who was in Foreigner. You got Gary Wright of Dreamweaver fame. I don't know who else. I mean, there's a jillion people in there. And this ties you into other people. Frampton was replaced in Humble Pie by a guy named, what was his name? Clem
Clemson.
Clem Clemson. I think Clem was a nickname, John Clemson, but Clem Clemson replaces Frampton. Well, he later played with Cozy Powell in a band, and once you're tied into Cozy Powell, you're tied into every single band that's ever played, pretty much. But again, this is one of those UK bands that are tied to almost everyone through that rock and roll family tree.
I tell you, I would love to have been 16 years old in 1968 or 69 in England, wherever.
It was
I mean, something was in the water, right? How many bands?
And it seems like it was so small. You know, London's obviously a big city, but all of these people knew each other, and they all played with each other in various permutations, you know, and that's why everyone's tied together like that. But and Steve Marriott, he was a mover and shaker. I mean, when he was 18 years old, people like Pete Townsend and the Rolling Stones, they were coming to his house. You know, they were hanging out with him in his apartment. He was a mod. I mean, he was Austin Powers before Austin Powers was. And it goes back even further. He was a child actor. So he started in like 1960 or 61 as a child actor, and he was on TV shows and in commercials. He played the Artful Dodger in Oliver Twist. And in fact, he appears on the recording of the stage show of Oliver Twist. This is before the movie Oliver came out in like the early 70s, but he was on some of the early, records of Oliver Twist. And so kind of was in the spotlight from an early age, and not just a great singer, great guitar player.
Singing while playing the guitar.
Oh yeah.
Like
and
that.
Not playing simple stuff. I mean, he was good. And sadly, like many artists of the day, he was ripped off by record companies, and there were situations where it looked like they got ripped off when they were in the Small Faces. It looks like even in Humble Pie, they were ripped off and weren't paid what was owed to them. And he, after Humble Pie, he kind of tried to do his own thing in the 70s. And there's several albums that you can find, live albums of Steve Marriott or short reunions of Humble Pie where they do a one-off tour or a live album. But he never really regained the position he had. And it looks like in fact, I've read articles about how he didn't have any money, and sadly he died in a house fire in 1991, I think, April of 1991. So it's kind of he's kind of a sad figure, because he's still viewed as one of the great vocalists of that era. And he just did not have the same level of success that many of his, compatriots had at that time. Clearly, I mean, look at Frampton. I mean, Frampton had one of the biggest albums ever, biggest live albums ever. But yeah, Steve Marriott didn't have that same fate. So
I read, the infamous Grand Funk Railroad opening playing Shea Stadium.
Yes.
At that time, they actually broke the record that the Beatles held for the fastest selling out.
I did see that. They sold out. That was Shea Stadium, right?
Shea Stadium, yeah. And the Humble Pie opened for Grand Funk at that show.
Yeah.
Thought that was kind of interesting.
And that whole, I'll save this for once we start going track by track. But it's funny you mentioned Grand Funk, because albums are a snapshot of a time, right? So this is 1972. Think about the bands that were big in 1972. Grand Funk was one of them, Rare Earth. Okay. And I think of Rare Earth when I hear this, because it's very There's a lot of soul and R&B in this album. You know, you hear, to me, I kind of hear some Bad Company, but it's like Bad Company with a lot more soul, if that makes sense. You know,
I'm not a gospel expert or anything, but it certainly has this gospel mix with rock and roll.
Big time, especially
bluesy thing.
Yeah, You're So Good for Me. I mean, that's a total gospel song, you know. Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier. I would say probably at least half the songs, I didn't count, but so many of these songs start out, you just hear the people talking in the studio. There's laughing, and it's a very loose type vibe, a very jam type vibe, if that makes sense. You know, you hear a lot of laughing at the beginning. It's not real tight. You know, you hear people talking, okay, they're counting it down. All of that banter's going on before the songs start, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, it's just, you don't hear that a lot on records. All right. So let's jump in and just for fun, we're going to rate each song. So we'll give it 1 through 5. What do we give it? 1 through 5 guitar picks. I rate this 5 guitar picks. I don't know. I don't know what we call it. Okay. We'll go with guitar picks. Okay. Sure. So instead of stars, we'll go with guitar picks. So the album starts with a tune called Hot and Nasty. Great song.
Now, are there ladies singing on this? I couldn't find any confirmation. But
like you said, were they called the blueberries or blackberries?
Blackberries.
I've seen mention of the blackberries. You obviously hear them on You're So Good for Me, but that's the only song I can tell for sure that there's ladies on. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think there was some credit of backing vocals, but it wasn't from either of the 3 blackberries. Ladies, Doris Troy and Madeline Bell. But you know, I don't know, maybe back then they're like, we're just not going to credit these ladies,
which is very common. Oh, that's totally
very common back then.
Yeah, totally. And that could be, but this song is a good, very, very soulful, you know. And that's why it kind of reminds me of Rare Earth. You know, Rare Earth, people don't realize Rare Earth was signed to Motown, and they were a white rock band, you know, but they were signed to Motown, and they were very funky, very R&B. And I hear that on this album as well. There's just a lot of R&B influences. And Steve Marriott was very much influenced by Ray Charles, by Bobby Blue Bland, by a lot of these R&B and blues singers. So that kind of makes sense.
Definitely.
But the opening song, Hot and Nasty, is a great opening song. I mean, it just, when I first heard that, I go, I'm going to like this album. Yeah, it was good.
I love the Hammond. I love the organ.
The Hammond throughout is good. Yeah. They're tight. The drums are great. This Clement, what's his last name? Clemson. He's really good. I never even heard the guy, but looking at his history, he's good, and he's been associated with some pretty big groups. Coliseum was an early kind of jazz rock fusion band. Later became Coliseum 2 with Gary Moore. Well, before it became Coliseum 2, it was Coliseum, and Clem was the guy in there, you know. So pretty impressive. And again, he played in that group Strange Brew with Cozy Powell too. So the guy's good. The second song, The Fixer.
Wait, were you going to give it some picks?
Oh yeah, I got to give it some picks. I'm going to say,
obviously related to the album, right? In context.
Exactly. So song 1, Hot and Nasty. Man, I'm going to give it 4 guitar picks. What about you?
I think that's where I'd be too.
4 guitar picks. Okay. All right. So number 2, The Fixer.
I think one of my favorites.
It's up there too. Yeah. I think, do you like it better than Hot and Nasty?
Um, it's just different because it's got such a great riff.
Yep.
It's also starts off, I think, a little like Manic Depression by Jimmy.
I'm trying to think.
And then it goes into the riff, which reminds me of Leslie West and Mountain.
Yeah.
A little bit.
It's a cool single note, and there's a couple of those on here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it. I mean, I want to play it in the band for sure.
It's a great one. It's a great one. And it's again throughout, it's still that funky R&B vibe, which there's always, if you got your foot in the blues, right, there's always an element of that. But this is funkier than anything the Rolling Stones ever play. It's funkier than anything Bad Company or Free did, but it's still got the crunchy guitar, the cool riffs. So it's this fusion of better riffs than a Rare Earth, right? Or even a Grand Funk. But it still has that R&B influence. I really like it. So give
it a 5.
You give that a 5. I was going to give this one a 4 also. So I have it tied with Hot and Nasty. So you've given Hot and Nasty a 4, The Fixer a 5. I've given Hot and Nasty and The Fixer a 4. You mentioned gospel. So song number 3, You're So Good For Me. I love the acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
The harmonics at the beginning. It's cool. Now, is Steve Marriott singing on this, or is this someone else singing? Is this Greg Ridley singing? I think it might be someone different singing. I don't have it in my notes.
I know he sings on a different song.
Okay.
That Greg Ridley. So maybe it is that one.
Or it's Marriott. No. Is it Marriott on this one?
Old Time Feeling was sung by Greg Ridley.
Okay. All right. So this is still Marriott, but he's in a lower register probably. He sounds different because he's not way up in the stratosphere like we're used to hearing him. It's a good song. It's a gospel song. This to me sounds like a gospel song. It's a different pace and different energy than Hot and Nasty and The Fixer. A good song. I don't like it as much as the first 2 songs, but it's a good song. I would give it 3 guitar picks.
Yeah, it's different. It's different. It's nice to have a balance. We're seeing this pattern, I think, with the last few albums that we reviewed. Is you've got these harder riffy things, and then boom, we've got these sort of like, I think we talked about, the ballad before the power ballad was really deemed the power ballad.
Exactly.
These guys are, they're taking just a different little, they're getting off the highway. They're going for a little cruise in the country.
Yeah, I like it.
And then they're getting back on.
And so, okay, so we've done, let me think. We did Mountain, which was from, was that 1970? We did Phenomenon from UFO, which was 74. We're doing this one, which is 72. Is it safe to say that at that time, the bands were just a little more adventurous? Is that fair? Is that not fair? And if that is true, is that because the record companies allowed them the space to be a little more adventurous? I don't know.
I think they were almost cutting some ground. They were like pioneers in some sense.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think here it is, 2021, right? And I have to keep reminding myself when we do these older albums that, just to keep it in context, it's so much of what is just the norm now hadn't even happened yet. So to your point about them being pioneers, totally true. They're doing stuff for the first time. And then it's just become part of the lexicon, right? And we don't think anything of it. But I think when you're in that position, you have a little more leeway because you're already on this like train of, well, they're doing this. What is this? We don't know. It's a reaction to the 60s, or
It's this. It's
Right.
blues, hard rock. They're taking the blues and turning it into this. And then these guys are doing it gospel-y, bluesy, raspy, just soulful. And so it's like, oh, you want to come up with an acoustic thing? Sure. Why not?
It's great. It reminds me, this conversation reminds me of a great interview I saw with Frank Zappa, where he's talking about the record business. And I was kind of surprised to hear this because he said in the early days of the record business, you had these old stodgy business guys that were running the record companies. And he said, actually, they gave you more freedom than the later A&R guys, the later guys that knew all about rock music. He says, because by then there was a formula, and then they were starting to try to control the artists, where back in the 60s, it was business guys. They didn't know a thing about music. Do whatever you kids think is cool, you know, and they'd let them do that. And he'd say, we had a lot more freedom with these old stodgy business guys usually than with the cool long-haired guys that came in the 70s that were trying to tell us what to do on all of our albums. I just thought that was very interesting. And this is probably, you know, this early 70s. You think about a famous manager at the time, like a Peter Grant from Led Zeppelin, you know, that was all about his artists and all about, we could do a whole nother episode on Peter Grant. I think he probably swindled from the band, but in terms of creativity, you boys do whatever you know, you take it, you do it, you know? So I think there was probably a little more freedom in these days. And it shows, to your point earlier, that we see these dynamics on these albums that we don't necessarily see on albums later on.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
It reminds me of at the time, more or less, give or take, maybe it started a year or two before, but the whole West Coast psychedelic movement in San Francisco, where people were like, what is this? Not only is it, the music's kind of weird and different, but the cultural aspect of like, we're not going to work. We're just going to hang out. We're going to love. We're going to just all live together. And we're going to just play whatever we want to play. We don't care if we make money. And record companies didn't know what to do with that.
Exactly. And I'm glad you said that, because as I listen to that, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but when I hear this album, I hear those elements of, you know what I say if I say like hippy dippy, you know, it's loose, right? It's very loose. You've used the term quantize. It's not, this is very organic. They're in the studio, they're laughing, they're joking. The drums it's that wild early 70s drumming, you know, it's very loose. And I think that's a cool thing. And we kind of lost that later on, but it's here, and it's a very soulful R&B vibe with rock, you know, laced throughout. Now on this particular song, You're So Good For Me, again, like I said, it's a change of pace. It's got a cool acoustic guitar, very gospel-y sounding. You've got the ladies singing along. What'd you think? Does this song do it for you, or is it what do you think?
Don't forget, it's got the lyric, you've got the power to capture the hour.
I missed that. Hey, well, that's the guitar pick right there. That's good.
That's worth at least a half a pick.
That's good. That's good. I give this one. Did I already score this one?
Yeah, I think you gave it a 3.
I gave it a 3, and then I never let you score it. Yeah. So I gave it a 3.
That's pretty, I mean, you know, I liked it. I like it. I mean, I give it a 3, not a 2 or anything. Right. Because it's just a different song, but it's a great song.
Okay, good.
I like the I don't know if it's a bridge, maybe I guess it's a bridge where it almost gets a little more dreamy, and there's this really cool lead kind of guitar going on in the background. And I really like that change.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that specifically, to be honest. That's not one I mean, it wasn't one of my favorites. It's not a bad song. But not one I went back and revisited a whole lot, where a few of these I did. I mean, I've gone back and listened to a lot of these. But I do like kind of the change of pace. So you're good with 3 guitar picks for that one?
Yes, sir.
So, okay. So now number 4, which is a remake of an old Eddie Cochran tune.
Yeah.
Called Come On Everybody. This is the one I thought sounded like the Faces. I mean, this sounds like a song you would have heard Rod Stewart singing in the Faces. Just
absolutely
great swaggery song. I just love it. It's a great song.
It opens up with that. I feel like it's a Fender Tweed deluxe, just that real crunchy,
very crunchy. You can tell it's loud, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes.
I love this. This is probably, I'm giving this 4.5 stars.
Woo.
I like it. I rated it higher than both Hot and Nasty and The Fixer. I gave it 4.5 stars.
Okay. Wow.
I know.
All right.
What about
I'm gonna give it 4. I'm gonna give it 4.
Okay. All right.
Funny you were just talking about being loose.
Mm-hmm.
In my notes, and I don't have a timestamp, but I have there's like this BPM change somewhere, and I just love that, and it's just kind of falls into what we're talking about just they're just playing.
Yeah, they're just playing and they're grooving. Yeah,
you're human.
I didn't notice. Did you notice how long this album took to record? I didn't pay attention to the dates, how long it took. Again, just in general.
Oh.
These albums at this point, I mean, with some exceptions, Pink Floyd took forever. The Beatles took forever. But, this is also the time frame of, when Black Sabbath would make an album in 3 days, right? And so this album just has a very organic, loose feel. I would not be surprised if this is one of those albums that they didn't beat to death, right? They went in and recorded it and didn't waste a lot of time.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Kind of how I want to make an album.
That's the way to do it.
I want to get a tape machine,
Yeah.
Reel to reel.
Yeah.
Put everybody in a room.
Put in a room. Do it. That would be awesome.
Maybe separate the drums a little bit, but have everybody playing at the same time.
That would be perfect. And that's what they're doing, and that's why I mentioned earlier, I love just the live vibe where they're before almost every single song, you hear them talking, and I just love that. Okay. Number 5, I hate to be a party pooper. Number 5 blows. Okay. I do not like number 5. It's called Old Time Feelin'. And this is where don't remember, hate mail goes to Jeff. Okay. ClassicGuitarRocketMail.com. But
bring it on.
This song brings in 3 elements. Is it 3 elements? 2. There are 3 things that I do not want in my classic rock. This is Jeremy being super judgmental. Okay. I do not want boogie woogie piano in my classic rock. I don't want it. I'm fine with the B3. I love the Hammond organ, but I don't want the boogie woogie piano crap. And this has a lot of that. And Jeff Beck, love Jeff Beck. And you listen to some of the early Jeff Beck stuff. You got Jeff Beck, you got Cozy Powell on drums. Can't remember the singer, great singer. And then you got this honky tonk saloon piano player just desecrating the rest of the song. I hate it. Don't get me started. So we got the boogie woogie piano.
I wonder how many picks this is going to get.
Oh, I'm not going to give it much. It's got the boogie woogie piano. I have a little tiny jazz pick. I'll give this half of a Dunlop jazz pick is what this one gets. I don't like it. This does not.
Guess for me, it's almost just another extension of a rocky blues thing. It's just a softer,
Yeah.
happy, bouncy thing. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, I get what you're saying. I mean, that's, you could almost say the same thing about any song that has a mandolin.
Well,
If it's in a rock song.
Here's the thing. Okay. And this is, let's just put it on the table. Okay. I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie. Boogie Woogie piano followed by horns. I don't want horns. I don't like horns. Well, let me rephrase that. Some bands, I love horns. I love Chicago. Okay. It wouldn't be Chicago without horns. But I got one of my biggest arguments with the guy talking about a UFO album from 1982 called Mechanics that starts out with one of the most jamming guitar riffs ever on a song called The Rider. And then all of a sudden these Memphis horns come in and I'm like, oh, what are you doing? What, you just ruined this song. So I hate horns. Okay. That song, I'm so bad. And this song has this too. I'm not a big fan of harmonicas. I'm just not. So now I've crushed everyone's dreams. You know, I don't want the boogie woogie piano. I don't want horns. I don't want,
What do you want?
I don't know. But yeah, this song just doesn't do it for me.
You know, there's harmonica in The Fixer.
I know, but it's okay in that.
It's buried a little bit in the mix.
And there are some great songs with harmonica. You know, Neil Young has harmonica in a lot of his songs that I love, right? But at this point, it was just pissing me off because I was already mad about the boogie woogie piano. And then you're going to bring in a harmonica on top of that. I'm like, oh, but yeah, this song did not do it for me. Sorry. It gets half
a jazz pick.
Jazz pick. And for those of you that don't know, the jazz pick is a really little pick. And I'm giving half of that for this.
Wow.
I know that was harsh. What about you? What do you think? How are you going
to this was the song sung by the bass player, right?
Yes.
Craig Ridley.
Yeah.
And also Alexis Corner.
I saw
guests on the track.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah.
And he's doing vocals and a tipple, which is like a mandolin, right?
Yeah, that's a new.
They're throwing it all in. You know what they needed on here? They needed a banjo and a tuba. And then it would have been. Then they would have had maybe a trombone. They could have. Anyways, sorry. Now I'm just being.
Why don't we just get a carnival band?
That's right.
I'm gonna give it a 3 just because I need to give it a little love.
Okay. All right. Well, good for you. All right.
You know, I appreciate it. It reminded me of Sitting on Top of the World, which I learned when I first moved here on guitar. It's like a bluegrassy, folky song.
Yeah.
So it kind of made me feel that. So I liked it. Didn't love it, but I liked it.
I'm glad you liked it. But that one didn't do it for me. I would be completely fine. And you know what? If they would have just left that song off, we would have 8 songs on the album, which is fine. 8 songs is great. Instead, we've got 9. But yeah, that's the only song that I did not like. So side 2 kicks off with 30 Days in the Hole. And 30 Days in the Hole, probably still my favorite song on the album. It's just, I mean, the singing, I mean, this is one of those iconic songs. I've heard it pretty much my whole adult life, and to be honest, kind of surprised I never dug a little further because I've always loved this song. And it's great. The singing's great. The guitar playing's great. It's just great.
Apologize, I lost you for a second.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying how much I love this song. Song 30 Days in the Hole.
Yeah. Again, ladies, is it who's singing all the high parts? Is it only him? Is it the ladies? Is it?
It's probably him, and there's probably some of the ladies singing with him. Now that as I'm hearing it in my head, I think the background singers are probably helping out there. But this is a stellar vocal performance by Steve Marriott. It's awesome. I think I lost you, Jeff. Are you still there? Okay, are you back now?
I'm back.
I lost you that time. So okay. So what was the last thing I said? I said it was a stellar vocal performance.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
This
And
is the one where they're kind of like, they're almost like practicing, rehearsing in
at
the
the beginning, yeah, they're just like 30 days. They sing it a cappella at the beginning. Yeah, and then it kicks in. And that's cool because when you hear it on the radio, you don't hear that part. They just start with the beginning of that little guitar
Oh, is that
riff
right?
at the beginning. Yeah, it's just great.
I like the drum sounds,
Yeah.
the mix, or the kit. I don't know. Yeah, I love it. I feel like it's right there, right in front of your face.
Yeah, it's a classic, and
Covered by lots of artists.
lots of artists have done it. And I knew Frampton was in Humble Pie, and I always assumed Frampton was the one playing on that song, but it's not Frampton. It's our buddy Clem. But just a great tune. And then the one after this.
Oh wait, you got 5 picks for that one?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. That's 5 picks. Yeah, that one gets 5 picks.
Me too.
Yeah, classic. And then I really like the next one. It's called Roadrunner's G Jam. So we know what key it's in, right? And this was the product of a jam, right? That they just kind of put together, and it's great. So Roadrunner, okay, the Roadrunner song, Holland, Dozier, and Holland. Those guys are from what band, Jeff? Temptations song, Roadrunner? I don't know.
I thought I read it came from Junior Walker's, but I could be.
Could be Holland, Dozier, and Holland. Let's look this up because this is and we can edit this out.
Songwriting production team made up of Lamont Dozier and brothers Brian and Eddie Holland. They wrote lots of songs and produced and arranged that define the Motown sound of the 60s.
So Holland, Dozier, Holland, a big part of the Motown sound. And they call this, and there was a song Roadrunner that they wrote, and that was done by, I don't know, the Temptations, one of the big Motown groups. And so this is kind of a rave up of that song, but they call it the G Jam because they changed it up quite a bit. But they do credit Holland, Dozier, Holland for the writing. Again, something that Led Zeppelin wouldn't have done.
And the best part about this song for me is Stephen Stills is playing the Hammond.
Yes, Stephen Stills makes an appearance on this song, and I think is helping with the background vocals too. So that's awesome.
Apparently he was next door recording and just kind of strolled on over.
And you hear of that happening so much. How many classic songs have you heard where, yeah, we were next door and they hopped in? Dwayne Allman on Layla, next door. And that's probably the most famous part of that album is Dwayne Allman's slide solo at the end of Layla. And he just was working next door and came in and did. I don't think he got paid for it, he might have, but that was so common. Then people would just sit in and play songs. There's a great interview with the Wrecking Crew, which was the studio musicians in LA. Glenn Campbell was one. I can't remember all the guys, but Glenn Campbell tells this story of there's a kid that used to come and hang out at the studio. He was like 15-year-old kid. And, he kind of got to be friends with all the guys because he just loved it and just like hanging out with them. And this 15-year-old kid played on a lot of albums and never got credit, never got paid. He'd just sit in and play with them. It was a different world back then. That's pretty cool.
I don't know how many studios were in London at the time, right? Maybe there was only like 2 or 3 studios.
Right. Could be.
So, people just are bound to bump into each other.
Hey, come in and play on this song. Sure. I like this one. I give this one 4 stars. What about you? Or I said stars. I meant guitar picks. I give it 4 guitar picks.
Yeah, I'm gonna just do 3.75.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, this leads me to one of my other favorites,
Really?
which is I Wonder. It's got a few elements that I really like. I love song. There's a name for this musically speaking, but you know when the song starts with what sounds like the end. It comes in with the big crescendo right at the beginning, like you normally hear at the end of the song, and then they go into the kind of a simple. It's a blues song, right? It's a blues song with both guys kind of trading guitar licks, kind of playing simultaneously through a lot of it. But it's just a great blues song. You know, and I haven't said this yet. The bass playing is awesome throughout this album. This Greg Ridley guy is phenomenal. It's just great bass playing throughout. And I notice it really on this song too. But this is just a great blues tune. It's the longest song on the album, by the way. It's 8:53.
It is long,
but it's a blues jam. I mean, it's great.
Is there a harmonica in this one?
I don't know, but you know what? If it's good enough, I'm able to ignore the harmonica. It's when you pile it up, man. If you put boogie woogie piano, harmonica, and horns all on the same song,
you're leaving.
It's doomed. It's doomed. So,
I love the wah.
The wah is awesome on this song. Yeah.
Yes. And there's a few songs where they're wahing it up, but this one especially
really good on this one. Yeah, this is a good one.
Do you know that tune "You Shook Me"?
I do.
Probably Zeppelin covering some blues guy, right?
Willie Dixon, probably. Yeah.
You shook me all night long.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has that kind of same junk, gunk, 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 gunk.
Yep. And this one has the very Robert Planty, and I say Robert Planty, it's Plant's borrowing from Marriott here. But you when Zeppelin is doing their blues stuff and he's doing the really getting into it vocally, you know, he sounds like Steve Marriott. You know, that's where you hear it. You could tell that Steve Marriott was a major influence on Robert Plant. And this song has a lot of that in it. It's awesome. I didn't score this one yet. I give this one 4.5 picks.
Woo.
Yeah. I like it.
I'm giving it 4.
Okay. And then the last song on the album,
Sweet Peace and Time.
Sweet Peace and Time. I'm not remembering it very well. I remember I like it. I do like it. But I didn't write notes down on this one.
Opens up with a great little drum fill. Again, great drum sounds.
Okay. Yeah.
Very rock and roll, like very almost like I feel like the Black Crowes pulled from this kind of style.
Oh, you know what?
On this song.
That's a great observation. I can totally see. Yes. Yeah. Black Crowes. I hadn't even thought about that, but just in general, I think the Black Crowes drew a lot from these guys.
Totally.
And just in doing the research, lots of folks talk about the influence that Humble Pie had on them. I mean, even the guy from Blondie, the drummer in Blondie, whose name is also Clem Burke, he talks about how huge Humble Pie was to them, which you don't think of Blondie as being heavily influenced by. But these guys are they know how to groove, right? It's a very, very rhythmic, very R&B, more so than a lot of the British bands, the British blues-based bands. These guys added that funk and R&B element more than most, and they could just make it swing, and it was really good. I don't remember this song very well. I'm going to give it 3.5 picks because it's got to be good.
It's good. It is good. Listen to it again tonight.
I'll listen to it again. What do you rate it?
I'm gonna do 4.
4 stars. Okay.
4 pecorinos.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you recommend this album to other classic rock fans?
I say a 10.
10? Okay.
Yes.
It's up there. I don't know if I'd say a 10. I'd at least say a
9.
9 though. Yeah, I mean it's up there. This is do you prefer this to Mountain? Let's compare it to Mountain. If you had to choose, would you pick this one or Mountain?
Oh, I don't know if I could choose.
If I had to choose, I'd choose this one.
Is it more versatile or more?
It's more groove, right? Mountain's got the Felix's vocals are kind of that stodgy British Jack Bruce type vocals versus Steve Marriott, which is very soulful. And
but Leslie's got the voice. And I think they just didn't have as many funky, like Never in My Life.
Yeah.
That's a great, powerful riff.
That is a good one.
But you're right. There's some more.
Yeah. And that's a good point. If you're just comparing guitar riffs, pure riffage, I'd probably go with Mountain. But taking in all the elements, I'd probably go with this one. This is a funkier. Yeah, it's just it's good. I mean, this is a funky album in a very good way. I think it's great. So I would, 9. It's one that I would highly recommend. And when you listen to it, when you look into Steve Marriott, especially, and realize this is a guy that was very influential, and yet didn't get the credit that he deserved, didn't get the notoriety that he deserved. But when you talk to people in the industry, I mean, everything I've seen is how it's like Steve Marriott was one of the greatest vocalists ever, and it's kind of a shame that more people don't know about it. So,
yeah.
So I will fly the Humble Pie flag and let people know. And by the way, I had to look up what Humble Pie is. You remember what Humble Pie is? Originally called Humble Pie. And it was dates back to like medieval times. There's duplicate meanings, right? So when people say humble pie now, it refers to you had to eat your humble pie, meaning you were embarrassed or you had to admit you were wrong. We talk about eating humble pie. That's what that means. But the true humble pie was an old pastry from way back in medieval times that they'd fill with like the nasty
goat meat.
yeah but like the liver and the heart, it would be kind of like the nasty bits
yeah
of particularly venison, or a goat or a cow or whatever. That was humble pie,
spam of the medieval times.
Exactly, the spam of medieval times. That's exactly what it was. Mystery meat, but that's what it was. Great album. Jeff, it was great talking to you again this week.
You too, Mr. Jeremy.
I want to remind everyone to email us, classicguitarrock@mail.com. And again, we are on pretty much all the major platforms. So please, if you haven't already, follow us or subscribe, leave a review. Reviews are very helpful, especially on Apple Podcasts. So if you don't mind, go out to Apple Podcasts, leave a review if you enjoyed this. And as we mentioned last time, we are on Patreon. So if you'd like to be a patron, check us out at patreon.com. And we will see you. Jeff, do we know what album we're doing next? Have we decided?
No, I think it's your pick though, huh?
My pick. Okay. I don't have one off the top of my head, so I'll let you know. But
can we ask for some suggestions and if someone leaves a review?
That's a great idea.
Or sends an email.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of start all over and we'll edit it. So we'll say that. So now for the next episode, what we'd like to try is we would love for you to email us and recommend an album. So let us know an album, classicguitarrock@mail.com. Send us an email and let us know what album you would like for us to spotlight and we'll do that. That's a great idea, Jeff. That was
Any-
Jeff's idea to do that.
Any parameters that they should be aware of?
All I would say, again, I have a pretty broad category. I would say it's rock driven music from, you know, the 60s through the mid 80s. You know, if
You're going 80s, huh?
I
Okay.
would totally, why not? You know,
I would say 68 to 78, but that's just
68, 78. Well,
I don't know.
I just push it out. Come on, let's give the Gen Xers. We're both Gen Xers, aren't we? Yeah. So we'll push it out to like the mid 80s. So if you want to do a mid 80s, if you want to do a Def Leppard, I'd totally do a Def Leppard. You know,
Great bands.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, email us classicguitarrock@mail.com. Recommendations for albums you'd like us to do, and we'll do that. So with that, Jeff, great seeing you. And
You too, buddy.
We'll see you next time on the Classic Guitar Rock podcast.
Keep rocking.
Awesome.